Valley is one of the more unusual places in the wine world in that if you raise an elevation to a certain point, you get hotter. And once we hop out, I'll be able to kind of show you geographically why that is the case. So all of the hottest vineyards here in the Walla Walla Valley are all actually up here a little bit higher in elevation. In fact, everything back along this ridgeline is all cab for the most part because of how much warmer it is up here. So you are now at Watermill's Anna Marie Vineyard, and in fact, our plot of land actually extends all the way from the road that we turned off on, all the way back up to where those trees are planted. The back portion is just apple fields, or will be apple fields. This is a little more agriculturally oriented, but once we get down a little further, I can show you some high density stuff. So. The Seven Hills is just the name of the ridgeline that stretches all the way from the Blue Mountains, which are here to our right, or to the east, to the Columbia River, which you can't really see today, but is about 30 miles due west of us here. It is special for two reasons. Number one, it is one of the warmest areas in the Walla Walla Valley, and then number two, it has a different soil type than a lot of the other areas. So up here we have this stuff called loess. Loess is just blown and compacted dust particles. It's all over the Willamette Valley as well. But what you get is we don't really have sand here, but what you get is sorry, I'll try not to get any on your shirt, a very fine powder-like substance that blows very easily. And so what happens is these fine dust particles are picked up from the Columbia Valley and then blown down to the southeastern end of the Walla Walla Valley, where they can't go any further because there are big mountains right there. So you get this one very special area where all of this dust has blown and settled over time, makes for very, very good grape growing. Now I mentioned that the Walla Walla Valley...
not very nutritious.
No. I mean,
which forces the grapes to go deep.
It does. You can do some things in terms of where you plant with the layer below it. So there's layers of bedrock and then also some layers of marine sedimentary soil where you can get down to an area that's a little bit more nutrient dense, but no, for the most part here it's pretty light. So temperature wise, so the same way that those fine dust particles get blown down to the southeastern end of the valley, you also have moisture. So there's a rain shadow that's caused by the Cascade Mountains. It turns all of eastern Washington into a desert. Well, what happens is as wind kind of blows down the specifically Columbia and Yakima valleys, it accumulates moisture over time until it gets to here, so the next mountain range over. So what happens is we don't get a ton of rain, but what we get is fog and cloud cover, and it sits here at the southern end of the valley. And so if you are able to plant up a little bit and get above the colder temperature that is harbored on the valley floor, you can get some really nice warm temperatures. So again, that's why I go back to saying the southeastern end of the Walla Walla Valley is one of the weird places where if you go up a little bit in elevation, you're going to get hotter, which is why we have all of our Bordeaux varieties planted up here, and then all of our Rhone varieties, which are a little bit earlier ripening, especially Syrah, planted down here planted down there on the valley floor. Grenache is the next most popular, followed by Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I'm not even sure what the fourth one would be after that. Tempranillo, maybe? To the right here, we have Syrah. To the left is actually Tempranillo. That vineyard is much older than this one. This is kind of the new farming practice, which everyone is using in the rocks. This is buried cane, obviously. So what you see coming up, and sorry, this vineyard is a little collecting some garbage. So the trunk, the head of the trunk, is actually buried underneath the ground here, and what you see coming up are just the shoots. So the things that normally would be running along the vine are actually underground, and it's just the vertically growing shoots that we pull out. And there are a number of reasons why we do that. Number one, it helps protect the trunk of the vine against freeze. As I mentioned, it's a colder area here down on the valley floor, and so freeze is much more common. And then the other reason that we do this is solar radiation goes into the grape cluster to help keep them warm. So if you, and you can probably even feel it today, if you pick up one of these rocks, it's much warmer than the ambient air temperature around it. So what these rocks do, and especially in the summer, they can raise the ambient air temperature to well over 100 degrees, as long as you are within about 2 feet. So it's usually the second training wire here is right at about 2 feet. As long as you are within 2 feet and lower, the grape cluster will absorb that solar radiation. So from here to here, you have one of the hottest growing regions in all of the Pacific Northwest. From here and above, you have one of the coldest growing regions in the Northwest. So you have to get your cluster just in the perfect spot where it's not so low to the ground that the grapes are going to burn and shrivel, get sun damage, and you have to get them you have to keep them low enough that they're not going to get high and freeze. And so that is not always easy to do with the traditional farming methods, you know, tea style farming. It is a little bit easier to do with this buried cane method. All of this has to then, of course, be done by hand. It's very labor intensive. There are some machines that can work in here. Especially we have it's a reverse auger. So most of the time in agriculture, and you can see it with all of our tree fruit, you take the rocks and you push them as far down as you can. More of that solar radiation, more of that collection. So we have machines that will actually bring the rocks to the surface, which is why when you look around, and you can see it a little bit on that side, we'll really see it when we drive by Christoph's property. All of the oldest vineyards in the rocks have the most rocks on the top. They look almost entirely like a stone field. But it is an area that is just really wonderful and interesting. The word terroir gets thrown around a lot. I would argue that there may be 3 places in Washington, and we're actually in Oregon, but that's neither here nor there. There are probably 3 or 4 places in all of the Pacific Northwest that have true terroir. I think the Dundee Hills is one. I think Red Mountain in Washington is one. I actually think the Chelan AVA, of all places, is one. And then I think the Rocks District is one. I think it produces a unique flavor in our wine that cannot be replicated elsewhere. And I really love, I just love everything that's done here, whether it's Syrah, which is what most people are growing, or our experimental stuff like Tempranillo that just comes out really exciting.
That's
So,
interesting.
this one is still narrow enough to do via tractor, via narrow width tractor, but he has some that are so close, so dense now that they have to be done by a horse, which is a line of wines he has called Horsepower. And then you can tell the age of, so this is the first, this is Caillou right here. You can tell the age because of how high, there's no dirt on the top of that anymore. That is all rock.
I guess all the dirt got washed down.
Yep. So it's now entirely a rocky topsoil, and then down below it is the dirt.